Good evening. We're ready to get started with the new Masechta, Maseches Pesachim, Daf Beis, starting right at the beginning. The timing works out nicely that this will end just a handful of days prior to Pesach itself. And of course, one of the most prominent aspects of Pesach is not only that we eat matzah, but that we are not allowed to own chametz. Its own Isur D'Oraisa, a number of different references, multiple Isur D'Oraisa of owning or getting hana from chametz. And at the same time that's true, there's also a mitzvahs aseh, which we refer to as tashbisu. It's a mitzvahs aseh to get rid of chametz. So what our first Mishnah is going to be dealing with is the mitzvah of b'dikas chametz as we know it. Now, the way we've become accustomed to it, and it's codified this way in the Shulchan Aruch, we'll get there in time, which is that we do b'dikas chametz, we put out 10 pieces of bread, we try not to lose them, and then we do bittul when we're done. So there's a big machlokas rishonim starting here in the very first line of the Gemara between Rashi and Tosfos on this topic about whether or not b'dikas chametz, does that mitzvah derabanan? We know it's a mitzvah derabanan. Does the mitzvah derabanan of b'dikas chametz solve the chametz problem, which is an issue that's deoraisa, or bittul possibly? Which one? How does it work? So let's get started with this first Mishnah here in Maseches Pesachim Daf Beis. Or la'arba asar. We don't know what the word or means in the Mishnah. The word or means light. The Gemara is going to go through literally 13 different questions to try and figure out what the word or actually means, but we'll translate it as we know the conclusion is. On the night, le'arba asar, the 14th of the month of Nisan, bod kenes chametz le'or haner, one should check for chametz with the light of a candle. Every single word here is rich with rishonim and analysis, requires a lot to think about, a lot to talk about here. We're not going to talk about it at length now, other than to very quickly see Rashi and Tosfos. So he said on the night of the 14th, we're bod kenes chametz le'or haner. What does Rashi say? Rashi, second line, Dibur hamaschil bodkin, shelo ya'avor alav bebal yura uvebal yimatzeh. The phrase bal yura bal yimatzeh is the phrase that indicates that you have violated the issur of ownership of chametz. If, for example, you don't sell your chametz, or you buy chametz on Pesach, whatever the case may be, if you actually own chametz on Pesach, you violated the Isur D'Oraisa Bal Yira Bal Yimatzeh. So Rashi says, b'dikas chametz solves the problem of the D'Oraisa of owning chametz. Says Tosfos at the top, Dibur Maschil or Labas or Bod Kenes chametz Pirusha Kuntras. What does Rashi say? Shalolav or Lav Bal Yira Bal Yimatzeh. That's what he said. We just saw that. V'kasha l'ri, I don't understand. Kevan ditzarich bittul. Since anyways you're going to do bittul, so then kidei amrina begemara habodek tzarich sheyivatel. We know from later, we'll see this on Daf Vav. We know that you have to do bittul anyways. So if that's the case, then umidoraisa bebittul ba'al masagi. All I need is bittul. So what's Rashi saying that I'm solving myself from an Isur D'Oraisa? That's not true. Bittul solves me from the Isur D'Oraisa, and therefore Tosfos says, fourth line of Tosfos, v'nira l'ri de'afal gav desagi bebittul be'alma. Even though it's true, all I need to say is kol chamir b'chamia dika b'rishusi. Sufficient, that works, but says Tosfos a very important idea. Hechmiru chachamim livdok chametz ulevaro for a halachic concern shelo yavala ochlo. Yes, it's correct. Bittul suffices, and you don't need to do b'dika on a Torah level. You're done. But what's our Mishnah talking about? We want to make sure we don't violate the Isser of accidentally eating it. A gzeira derabanan. So Rashi and Tosfos take this one mitzvah derabanan of b'dika, and they view them in drastically different ways. Rashi says you're checking off a deoraisa box of no longer owning chametz. Tosfos says you already checked off that box with bittul. You're done. What are we actually doing here? We're just preventing the risk of maybe what the language later in the Maseches calls shema yimtza gluska yafe. You find like an Entenmann's donut, like with the crumbs on top. It's Pesach, and you're like, that's what Tosfos is concerned about. Not ownership, you are mavatel. But if you eat it, then you ate chametz. He's not concerned about ownership. He's concerned about achila. Machlokas Rashi Tosfos. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah continuing, Kol makom shein machnisin bo chametz ein sarach bedika. Anywhere where no chametz was brought, you do not have to check there. As my Rabbi once said, he told his Rebbitzin, you don't have to clean in between the tiles with Q-tips. That's not the mitzvah. There's no chametz inside, absorbed in the grout. You're fine. It's not spring cleaning. It's cleaning for Pesach. It doesn't take much. Sweep. Go find places where you know you brought chametz. That's the only place you're obligated to check. So, great example. What about on top of the fridge? No, why? Unless you keep chametz on top of the fridge. So when you have little kids at home, we have found full pancakes, pretzels, you name it, in the toy bin. Then you're obligated. Pasha, that's the mitzvah of dikas chametz if you have little kids. And the equivalent here is a mouse, actually, an achbar, that you don't know where they took the chametz. You got to check the whole house. And we'll get into those dinim later. But if it's a place that you've never taken food before, you don't have to check. Continues the mission of apparently they had a long-standing statement that you had to check 2 shuros of barrels, 2 rows of barrels in the basement, in the cellar. When was that true? That was only makom shemachnisim bo chametz. Only if, in fact, there was chametz brought in that room. And if there was no chametz brought in that room, then there is no need. And then here we see a machlokas beis Shammai beis Hillel. I'll just read it right now, but we're not going to get into the details of it today. Says the Mishnah, beis Shammai omrim beis shuros al pnei kol hamartev, 2 rows on the whole face of the basement, of the cellar. Ubeis Hillel omrim shtei shuros hachitzonos shehein elyonos, the 2 upper ones, which are the 2 outer ones that you face. We'll get into this sugya and really what each of them are holding at a later time. What's the Gemara bothered by? What does the word or mean? My or. The Gemara opens with this sugya. And this Gemara will take up more than today. Today we'll hit 9 of the 13 analyses of the word or, and we'll see a variety of directions in how we're going to figure out what the word or means. So let's just get started. But we have to remember these 2 shitas. Rav Huna Amar Naghi, we're talking about or means day. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Lele. So just a machlokas. What does Naghi mean? Let's just think tachlis. What does Rav Huna mean? You wake up on the 14th of Nisan in the morning. It's the day. That night, chametz is going to be, that afternoon, chametz is going to be aser. So then what do? That morning, you wake up, you do bdikas chametz, that's Rav Huna. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda Omer Lele. It's the night before. And this is our minhag, we pass like Rabbi Yehuda, that as the night ends, ending the 13th, or la'arba asar, as we go into the night of the 14th of Nisan, that's when we have a mitzvah of bdikas chametz, shitas Reb Yehuda. Kasal kadaitach, what's our havamina? How do we understand this? Kasal kadaitach, demanda amar naghi mamish. The one who says day, the shita of Rav Huna, he means naghi mamish in the morning. That's what he's talking about. And umanda amar lele mamish, and the shita of Rabbi Yehuda means at night. Rashi and Tosfos here are different versions. Rashi says that there's actually extra words in the Gemara. The phrase that says umanda amar lele mamish we don't need. The only part that was confusing was what or means. We know what night means. Night means dark, and we'll see later in the Gemara a direct reference to that. All right, let's get started with our analysis. What are the proofs to each side? What does the word or mean when it says or la'arba asar? Namely, let me ask the question in halachic terms, when do we do bdikas chametz? When is it? Is it the night going into the 14th or the morning when you wake up? Says the Gemara, Meisvei, we have a source in the Tanaim that says, quoting a pasuk, the pasuk says, a pasuk in Breshis, Haboker or v'ha'anoshim shulchu, and the pasuk finishes, Hema v'chamorehem. Haboker or, what does that sound like that the word or means? Pashut, says the Gemara, Alma, or Yamamahu. Thank you. We see a perfect text proof from the Torah. Pasuk in Breshis. Says the Gemara, nope, no good. Miksiv, ha'or boker. Does it mean that the word or is equivalent to boker, or no, ha-boker, or the morning is bright? This is the distinction between using or as a descriptor or as the definition of. I describe a scenario. That light is very bright. That doesn't mean that it's day. It means the light is bright. So the Gemara is picking on this, and Rashi actually refers to this in grammatical terms as a shem davar versus not a shem davar. So are we describing something as bright, in which case it's not an indicator that it's day, or are we saying, as the Gemara labels here, it's miksiv ha-or boker? Does it say that or is boker? No, it says ha-boker or, that there was light in the morning. Ha-boker or ksiv. Kiman de-amar tzafar nahar. Like someone who wakes up and says, oh, it's so bright outside. But the word or was not being used as the definition of day, or is it yom, or is just a brightness. How bright is the screen? How bright is the sun? Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab. And this is like the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab, he says, a catchphrase, La'olam yikanes adam b'chitov, v'yetze b'chitov. A person should enter and leave when things are tov. What's he talking about? Rashi to the right, 1 inch down, Dibur hamaschil b'chitov. Rashi says halfway down in the Rashis, Rashi says, Hayotze l'derech, a person who's traveling, yikanes arbis l'beis malon, you should get off of the highway and be in the hotel, be'od hachama zorachas, while the sun is still out. Ulemachar, and the next day, when you're leaving in the morning, yamtin, you should wait ad hanetzachama until the sun is up, till the sun breaks the horizon. The yetze, the uz, that's when you should leave. The uz tov lo, that's considered good. Shal or tov lo, it's good when it's sunny outside. So the Gemara is pointing out, question 1, what about the pasuk that says haboker or? Says the Gemara, not a raya. All that's it's a descriptor, it's not a definition. Let's do try number 2, 1/3 of the way down. Gemara says meisive, the pasuk says or boker yizrach shemesh. With the light of the morning, Yizrach shemesh, the sun is shining. Alma or yamamahu, another similar text proof. We see from here that or seems to be day. Says Gemara, no. Miksiv or boker, same as before. Is it a descriptor or is it a definition? Miksiv, does it say that or is boker? No, it says uche or boker ksiv with a chav. It's kind of like light in the morning. The hachi kamar. What does this pasuk really mean? It's a drasha. Uke or boker be'olam hazeh. When there is a little bit of light in the morning, that's ke'ein zrichas shemesh letzadikim le'olam haba. It's a tam, a flavor. The light that you see in the morning, it's gorgeous. You watch the sunrise. That's a tam of what it's like for tzadikim le'olam haba. That was question 2, asked and rejected. Question 3, halfway down. Mesive, the pasuk says, this one's really direct. Vayikra Elokim le'or yom. Doesn't get much better than that. Hashem called or yom. Perfect proof. This is like the slam dunk proof, right? It's so clear. Alma or yamamahu, says the Gemara, we see our proof that or is referring to day, and therefore bdikas chametz should be in the morning. Says the Gemara, no. Hachi ka'amar. All it's saying is, again, descriptor versus definition. L'meir uva kreo yom. When it gets a little bit light, then we're talking about day. But no, or is not actually day. Says Gemara, that can't work. That can't work. You can't say that just because it's a little light that it's day, because if that's true, what about the other side? When it starts to get a little bit dark, we would call that night? That's not true. We consider everything to be day until Tzeis HaKochavim, which we learned in Maseches Brachos that is with 3 medium stars. Until that time, it's called Yamama. Very important Gemara for other contexts as to when Shabbos is over, when we say that you can break a fast, and all the myriad other halachos that are connected to what Tzeis HaKochavim actually means. So that's what the Gemara says here, is that you can't say that this pasuk means that it just meant when it started to get bright, that's day. No, because if that's true, then the pasuk later should have made more sense. When it starts to get dark, it's night. That doesn't work. So therefore, that answer doesn't work. We try another one. So says the Gemara, Ella hachi ka'amar. Really, we need to read it differently. And the way we're going to understand this Gemara, the way the Gemara should be understood, is that when the pasuk says Vayikra Elokim le'or yom, that Hashem called or day, he wasn't labeling it. What was he doing? He was commanding or to do something. Take a look at the Gemara. Karya Rachmana Linahora. He called out. HaKadosh Baruch Hu called out to the light. Upakte a mitzvah sadiyamama, and he gave him a tzivui to work during the day. Your job is to function during the day. Not that you are day, but you have a tzivui to do something during the day. V'karya Rachmana l'chashocha. He called tonight. Upakte a mitzvah sadalelia. So the word vayikra here doesn't mean I'm calling or yom. It means I'm being mitzaveh that day to shine and at night to be dark. So no, the pasuk of Vayikra doesn't mean I'm calling or. So we are again back to our starting point. We've asked and answered 3 questions, no proof yet. Question 4, 10 lines from the bottom. Yes.
Why is this word or there? Is this what we're trying to explain? Because it could have just said Choshach le'arasar.
Oh, could have been. It could have been, but in the end, we'll see a proof to our Gemara, to our Mishnah's language on the top of the next summer. We'll see a proof, but that the word or actually means night. But what the Gemara is bothered by is that or is used in a flip-flop. We haven't done the other way yet. We're going to see now with this next question that it actually or looks like night. All of the ones so far, questions 1, 2, and 3, is that or looks like day. But look at this next question. You'll see why it's not so pashut. And you asked your question at a perfect time, Michael. Mesive, 10 lines from the bottom. Hallelujah, kol kochavei or. We should give praise to all of the kochavei or, stars and its light. What does or mean in this context? Alma or tahu. Now we see that or is night. Or in Aramaic is night. So now this is the flip version. We've seen or mean day. Now I see or meaning night. So says the Gemara, what's pshat? How do we answer this question? So maybe we should do b'dikas chametz at night and reject the sheet of Rav Huna that it should be done during the day. Says the Gemara, hachi kamar. No. Hallelu kol kochvim hameirim. What we're trying to say is that we have an obligation to be mishabeach HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the stars that show light. Asks the Gemara a side question, seemingly elamayata. If that's true, then kochavim hameirim hu deba'u shvuche. We only praise the HaKadosh Baruch Hu for stars that have light. But what about the ones whose light we don't see? She'enan meirim lo ba'u shvuche. That's not true. You can't tell me that stars whose lights we don't see don't require shevach, because the pasuk says, "V'aksiv halalu kol tziva'ov." everything deserves praise. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made even the stars that don't have a lot of light. We should still be mishabech those. So says the Gemara, you're right, but your question is right. But
we're not being mishabech them. They're giving Shabbat to Hashem. I'm pretty sure.
She'enan me'irin lo ba'u shvuche. They don't ba'u. What are you saying?
They're giving.
Oh, they're giving the praise. Thank you. Good. So that's a great correction. So it says all of them are giving praise. So then how do we understand this Gemara that seemed to have left room for a distinction of kol kochve or? So answers the Gemara, and we're learning a side din from here. De or de kochavim nami orhu. That we call the or of stars light. Why is this important? Lamai nafkamina, says the Gemara, Lenoder min haor, that if a person were to make a neder that I'm not going to take benefit from any light, they would even be assered from this light. It's not, as the Mishnah writes, hanoder min haor, a person who makes a neder from light, aser be'oran shel kochavim. They can't even use the light of the stars. So that's why the pasuk delineated specifically those which are meir. And what did the pasuk say there? Hallelujah kol kochve or. Why did we distinguish? And we said that there are those that have light and those that don't, to remind us that if a person is noder min haor, that if a person makes a neder that they are not going to benefit from any light, so the din is that they are aser behana, even from the light from stars. Next question, where are we up to? Question number 5. 2 lines from the bottom, Beis Amud Aleph. Meisvei, we learned in a Tanaic source, the pasuk reads, Le'or yakum rotzeach yikatel ani ve'evyon. In the or, the murderer will get up and kill the poor and the destitute. Uvalayla, and at night yihi chaganav. And at night he will be the ganav. You can already see the contrast. The beginning of the pasuk says or, the end of the pasuk says balayla. Turning to the top of Beis Amud Beis, says the Gemara, a diuk from the Brisa, Hamidika Amar Uvalayla yihi chaganav, by virtue of the fact that it says at the end of the pasuk that he will be a ganav at night, alma, or, which was said in the beginning of the pasuk, is yamama. Good kasha, right? So now we're back to our starting point that maybe we should assume that or is daytime and the mitzvah of b'dikas chametz is in the morning of the 14th. Says the Gemara, no. The Gemara here is teaching us a din that is not based on pshat in the pasuk, but based on the sugya of hababa machteres and Maseches Sanhedrin. Let's say that someone's digging into your house. They're trying to tunnel into your house. Can you kill them? Says the Gemara. Second line, Hasam Hachi Kamar. What's that pasuk talking about? Ipshitalach milsa kinahora. If it's clear to you, as would be the sun, that someone's coming after you to kill you. So then the din is rotzeachu. That person has a din of a rotzeach. The nitan lahatzilo benafsho. You can kill him first, no problem. That's considered self-defense in halacha. You know they're coming after you to kill you, you can kill them. So it's a play on words. If it's so clear to you, kinahora, like or, that they're coming to kill you, then you can kill them. However, if you're unsure, like you might be unsure at night, then we would treat them like only a thief and not a murderer. And you could not kill them. So these are some very interesting shilas. How do you define a rodef? How do you define a rotzeach? A lot of different shilas come up nowadays. We've seen these terms thrown around a little liberally of late. So you got to be careful with how these terms are applied. Question number 6, 6 lines down. Meisvei. The pasuk writes, and this is a pasuk from Iyov, Yechshechu kochvei nishbo, yikav le'or va'ayin, va'al yireh be'afapei shachar. And this pasuk speaks about a couple of things, that the darkness of the stars will be shadowing him. Yikav le'or ve'ayin. He'll hope for light and won't have any. Va'al yireh be'afapei shachar, and you should not see the glimmer of dawn. So it says, the Gemara, yikav le'or ve'ayin. You'll hope for or ve'ayin, and it won't be. Diuk, alma or yamamahu. We see from Iyov, we see from there that the concern is the alma or yamama, that or is in fact light. So again, how can we have the shita that says that or is night? We see from here that or is light. Says the Gemara, no. There, Hasam, what was Iyov doing? Iyov was the archetype of all things terrible. He went through all of the tragedies that a person could go through in a lifetime. So Amar, what was happening over there? Sorry, not Amar. Hasam, me latu de kalai le Iyov lamazle. There, Iyov was giving a curse to his mazel. What does that mean? Okay, is this like astrology? Is this a satan? I don't know. Okay, it's the heebie-jeebie level of things. I don't know. Read the footnotes if they talk about them. Omar, what was he saying to his mazel? Yehi Rava, may it be the will, the litzbe hach gavril and nahori, you're going to be looking for light, v'lo lishkechei, and you won't find it. So it's a homily and not meant to actually speak about light. Therefore, no raya. Question 7. Next, David HaMelech, pasuk in Tehillim. The Omer, the pasuk says, va'omar, ach choshech yishufeni, the laila or ba'adeni. It says here, the pasuk says that in the night will become like light. The laila or ba'adeni, alma or yamamahu, the night will be like light. So why? We see another proof that that's going to be like day. So it says the Gemara, no. Hasam hachik amar David. There, David was being retrospective about some of the things that he had done wrong. Big machlokas, the Gemara in Gittin, kol ha'omer David chata inu elotoeh. Did David actually do a mistake with Bathsheba? Was he allowed to be with her? We know in the story in Tanakh that baby died. The baby from that relationship died, the first baby born. So again, a big discussion in the Rishonim. What happened because of Uriah? The way that it worked is when people went to war, her husband, Bathsheba's husband was Uriah, and he was at battle at the time. So when they went to battle, they would always write a conditional get that if I don't come back from battle, then really I was divorced from before I left. And he was put to the front lines of battle and killed. So that was the discussion in the Rishonim there. Elsewhere, we'll get there when we talk about it in Gittin. But David was looking here and feeling bad. He said, Ani amarti, ach chashoch yishufeni le'olam haba. I thought I was totally going to be gone for olam haba, shehu domeh leyom. And that day is bright over there. The world over there is beautiful. I thought I was going to lose all of that. Achshav ha'olam hazeh. Now that I know that I got kapara, and the Rashi here details all of this out. Rashi dibur maschel ani amarti, a few lines down, just a 7-line Rashi, so you can feel free to look at it. Achshav ha'olam hazeh shu domeh lelayla. In this world, it's going to be or ba'adeni. We will see a little bit of light in this world. He knew that he got kapara for his chait. Next, question 8. Question 8 is actually a Shema Mina question. We're going to actually have our first successful proof to the question. We've asked 7 questions so far, and none of them have panned out. Here's question 8. Meisve, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, bodken or la'arba asar. A person should ideally do bdika on or la'arba asar. And if they don't do that, then what's next? Ube arba asar shachris. Then if you miss that night, now we know what it means, because it says you should do or la'arba asar. If you miss it, what's next? The next morning. What's the diuk? Of course, that the night, that or means the night before. Uveshas biur. And if you miss early in the morning, then you should do it by the time of biur chametz. Diuk. What's the diuk from this brisa? Says the Gemara. Midika Amar of Yehuda bodkin, because it says bodkin or arba asar. Uve arba asar shachris. Because the second stage is shachris, we now know alma or ortahu. So now we know a raya brura, that we know that or means night. What does the Gemara say? Shema mina. You're right, taka. And the Gemara doesn't give an answer to this question. We embrace this question as you nailed it. You got it. You're absolutely correct. And we actually paskin like this. This Gemara is very strong. So what's strange is that the Gemara continues still with 4 more questions. We're only going to do 1 more for the night. This last question will take us till 4 lines to the bottom of the page, and then we'll stop for the night. And this, just a good question of methodology of Gemara. Why does the Gemara go on? Why does the Gemara continue here? So it could be, I'm not making a chiddush, I'm just saying it could just be that the Mari Makomos here are blaring, so we need to answer them. Like when you have a blaring question, you need to answer it, because even though you have a Mari Makom that indicates or is night, what if you have a conflicting Mari Makom? We have contradictions in Brises all over Shas. Brises, Toseftas, Mishnais, Midrashei Chazal, and we have to be able to answer for all of them. So let's see what the last question is for the day. We're halfway down. This is our 9th question of the night on the phrase of or le'arba asar. What does it mean? Mesibe. Here we have a Gemara. This Gemara is actually a Tosefta. We'll see this later on as well. Mesibe me'emasai arba asar asar b'asiyas melacha. On Erev Pesach, on the 14th of Nisan, midrabanan, we have a rabbinic commandment to stop doing malacha at some point before the holiday begins. So there's a machlokas when that is. Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov Omer Mishas Ha'or. He says it's going to be from the time of Or. As of yet, we don't know what that means. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishas HaNetzachama. Rabbi Yehuda is very clear. He says from the time the sun breaks over the horizon, you actually see the top crest of the sun. You know that it's actually good. You're good. So then Amar le Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov the Rabbi Yehuda. I don't understand something about you. You are saying something crazy. What are you saying, Rabbi Yehuda? Where in the Torah do we have the following scenario of Yom shemiksaso aser be'asiyas malacha umiksaso muter be'asiyas malacha? Where do we have a day that you wake up, part of your day there's no iser malacha, and the rest of the day there is? Go through the calendar. Shabbos, no way. It's from Shkia to Tzeis. Yom Kippur, Shkia to Tzeis. Yom Tov, Shkia to Tzeis. Every Isser Malacha that we have is a 25-hour Isser Malacha. So how in the world could you say that you get to start the Isser Malacha at Netzach Hama? What is that? How can you possibly start there? So Omar Lei, this is all part of the Tosefta. Omar Lei, Rabbi Yehuda says back to Rabbi, you're asking me how I can pick part of a day? The day you're asking about is Erev Pesach. That day, Hu Atzmo Yochiach. I have the best proof from that day. What's the proof? Shemikzaso moter be'achilas matzah, achilas chametz, excuse me. Part of that day, up until the Isser Deoraisa level of when you're no longer allowed to eat matzah, chametz. Up until the time you're not allowed to eat chametz. I'm too excited about Pesach. So up until that time, you're allowed to eat chametz. You can have anything you want. Pancakes are fine. The rest of that day is completely aser. So Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says to Rabbi Yehuda, how could you split the day in half? He's like, what are you talking about? This is how you split it in half. The day you're asking me about Isser Malacha, that day is split in half with chametz. The morning is allowed, the afternoon is not. So I don't understand. Now, end scene. That's the end of the Tosefta. So says the Gemara, 2/3 of the way down. By virtue of the fact that Rabbi Yehuda's shita was that the Isser Derabanan of Malacha on Erev Pesach begins at Netzach Hama, Alma, it implies that or Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov or Tahu. It implies that it had to be, what was Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov's whole argument? It has to be the whole day. So therefore, what's the only option for us? It had to be the night before by Shkia. It had to be when it got dark out. So or has to be when it gets, or it has to be nighttime. Says the Gemara, lo, not true. And then the Gemara says a very difficult answer. What did Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov mean? Amud HaShachar. What's Amud HaShachar? Alos HaShachar, synonymous. 72 minutes before Amud HaShachar. 72 minutes before Netzach Hama. So you have like the sun is not up yet. You start to see like the light pink in the sky starts to get a little bright. So that's called Amud HaShachar or Alos HaShachar. And Netzach Hama is when the sun actually breaks the horizon. Wait a second. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov's whole argument was that you can't break a day in half with malacha. So if you're saying, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, that or means Amud HaShachar, this early part of the morning before the sun rises, you're still splitting the day in half. That was your whole argument against Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, Ihachi, if it's true that Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says that or meant Amud HaShachar, 72 minutes before sunrise, Ihachi, Dika Amar Le, when he asks against Rabbi Yehuda, Heichan Matzinu Yom Shemiksaso Moter B'Asiyas Malacha, where do we find the day that's partially permissible for Malacha Miksaso Aser B'Asiyas Malacha? Neima Ihu Lenafshei. If he's going to say that or means Amud HaShachar, he should be asking that question against himself, because you parsed the day into two. The night was mutter and the day is aser. Can't have it both ways. Ha'ika laila de kashari. It doesn't make sense to say, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, that or means Amud HaShachar, because to say that means that the night was mutter with malacha, and comes Amud HaShachar, the day is going to be aser with malacha. So says the Gemara, he has a good answer for you. We're at the first of the longest lines. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, Hachi Kamar. What's pshat by him? He says, Bishlama Lididi, at least I have a precedent for my idea that all of the night could be mutter, and starting with Amud HaShachar, things could get aser. Bishlama Lididi, Ashkachna, there is a case that I could find, to Kapalge Rabbanan, where the rabbis would distinguish Ben Yamama Lalelia, between the night and Amud HaShachar, which is the beginning of the day. That's nan. Gabe Tainus Tzibor, we learn by Tainus Tzibor. We know that this is true of all Tainus Tzibor except for Tisha B'Av. Ad Masai Ochel V'Sho, so you can eat all night long until when? Ad Shiyala Amud HaShachar, Divi Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, and finishing off the Bryce of the other Shita, Reb Shimon Omer Ad Karos HaGever, until the time that the crow makes his sound. But the point is, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, I have some precedent where I could split the day in half at Amud HaShachar. That I've got that. Ela L'didach, but Reb Yehuda, according to you who says that the Isser Malacha Midrabanan starts at Netzach Hama when the sun breaks the horizon, L'didach, according to you, Heicha Ashkachna Yamama Gufe de Palge Be Rabbanan. Where do we see a case where the Isser Malacha starts in the day Beheter and then changes Netzach Hama? Where's the precedent for that? Amar Le, and it's how would he respond to that? How would Rabbi Yehuda respond to that? He would give the same answer as before. This is just another play on words. It's basically a richer version of the previous bride. So Amar Le, what would he say? Hu atzmo yochiach. That day would be the proof, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, because that day, what do we see? Shemiksaso muter be'achilas chametz. We know that the first part of the day is muter to eat chametz, umiksaso aser be'achilas chametz, and the rest of the day is aser. So says the Gemara, Shapir ka'amar le Reb Yehuda le Reb Elazar. That's a great kasha. Why did Reb Elazar ben Yaakov have trouble with that? That's a great example of half of a day being mutter and half of a day being usher. Chametz is a perfect example. What was bothering him? Reb Elazar ben Yaakov brought up the case of when do we have the Isser Malacha Midirabanan and Erev Pesach? He said it has to start from either Amud HaShachar or whatever it is, but it can't start in the middle of the day. So Rabbi Yehuda is like, what's your problem? That's what we do with chametz. So why is Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov so bothered? Answers the Gemara. 5, 6, 7 lines from the bottom. Hachi ka'amar le Rabbi Eliezer. What was he saying? He was saying as follows. Amina lach ana malacha derabanan. What was the starting Mishnah talking about? A malacha derabanan. The status of malacha miderabanan. That's what I was asking about. And where are you bringing me a raya from? From the Torah. Ve'at amras li chametz deoraisa. I want to know when the malacha midrabanan starts on Erev Pesach, and you're saying, "Oh, I can bring a proof from chametz, which is deoraisa." Da'ad hacha asa rachmana, da'ad hacha shara rachmana. That's the Torah. What a Kadosh Baruch Hu says, a Kadosh Baruch Hu says. That's up to him. But the rabbis, we need to have a rabbinic precedent for this, not a biblical one. So leave me be. You can't give me the argument of chametz. I'm talking about a status midrabanan. You can't give me an argument midoraisa. So if I want to know where rabbinic malacha ends on Erev Pesach, don't tell me chametz. Chametz is deoraisa. I'm talking about a din derabanan. The idach. What did Rabbi Yehuda say back to this? What a brilliant answer. And this is what we actually do. Yes, you're right that chametz has a line in the sand that's midoraisa, but we added 2 hours to that, which were midirabanan, to make sure we don't violate the Isser Torah. Says the Gemara, what would Rabbi Yehuda say back to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov? Shows derabanan. You're right, but the time that we stop eating is 2 hours prior to the Isser Doraisa. What? Right, exactly. The Isser Doraisa is at point X, and we add derabanan hours 2 hours earlier. So now, says Rabbi Yehuda, it's a level playing field. You were asking me about when malacha derabanan ends, and I'm comparing not to the deoraisa line of when chametz ends, but to the 2 hours prior, which are rabbinic hours. So you have rabbinic hours by chametz and rabbinic hours by malacha deraisa. So Rabbi Yehuda says, I'm giving you a good answer. I'm giving you what you want. They're both midirabanan. So what's his answer? Says the Gemara, V'idach, how does Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov answer Rabbi Yehuda? And with this we'll stop. Harchakahu da'avud rabbanan l'deoraisa. You can't compare. You can't compare. The only reason why there was the added restriction of hours, midirabanan, on the hard line of chametz, the 6th hour, you cannot eat any more chametz. We're concerned about that. So we made a harchaka midirabanan. That's different, says Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, than a formal freestanding Isser derabanan of a malach and Erev Yom Tov. They're not comparable. Because what was happening by the chametz? We were concerned you're going to eat chametz. So we said, because we're concerned you're going to eat chametz, I'm going to give you a harchaka. That's not what we're dealing with here with the malacha. So Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov holds that the malacha derabanan status, can I do malacha and Erev Pesach? You can't compare that derabanan to a derabanan of, I'm afraid you're going to violate the Isser of chametz. And therefore the cases are not comparable. And that's why they both stand on their own with their own shitas. We'll stop right here. We'll pick up tomorrow in Yirtzeh Hashem. 4 lines from the bottom on Daf Beis and Beis for Daf Gimel. Wishing you all a beautiful night.